Welcome back to Andy Cooks, the show where me, Andy, professional chef for over 20 years, brings you on my journey on becoming a better home cook. Because as we discussed in the last couple of videos, chefs don't often make the best home cooks. And as you probably saw in the thumbnail today, we are talking about pizza. Pizza is one of those dishes I've been a huge fan of for as long as I can remember, like most people. But it's only in the last couple of years that I've actually started making my own pizza. And it's been quite the learning curve. So today we're going to run through two types of dough, a 72-hour long ferment dough and a 1 hour as fast as I can make it kind of dough. And we're going to compare the differences and see what's better. Now, I think I know what's going to be better, but I want to taste them side by side to see how big the variance is and if it is worthwhile doing a 1 hour pizza at all, or if we should just leave this to special occasions where you have time to prep for it. It's not that complicated. At the same time, it's very complicated, if that makes sense. So let's get stuck in. What you're going to need are some type 00 flour. So this is a soft flour, which is specifically designed for pizza pretty much. You can just use all-purpose flour, but I would highly suggest that you take the effort and find some of this stuff. I know where I live in Australia, this is on the supermarket shelves now at most of the major supermarkets, so you shouldn't have too much of a trouble finding it. And then we're going to talk about the classic margarita today. So you're going to need some tinned tomatoes to make your tomato sauce. Now, you know, the Italians swear by the San Marino tomatoes. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, I apologize. I couldn't find some where I live. I know I can get them online, but I kind of ran out of time. So I've got these instead. You know, they're an Italian plum style tomato. I'm sure they should be pretty good. We'll taste them anyway and make sure that they're sweet enough. So we'll go through making the sauce and spoiler alert, you don't need to cook this before you use it. Salt, oil, water obviously, mozzarella and basil. So full credit where credit's due. The 72-hour long ferment recipe that I use is by an awesome home pizza maker. I'm pretty sure she lives in Singapore. I could be wrong. Apologies if I'm wrong on that. So her name is Leopard Crust Pizza, or she goes by the name Leopard Crust Pizza online. So check her out on Instagram. Makes some incredible looking pies, and I can vouch for this recipe. It's a real banger. And then the 1 hour one, I'm kind of going off gut feeling here, and basically all I'm going to do is up the yeast to try and get it actively as quickly as possible. Maybe put a little bit of sugar in there, and we'll see if we can proof it up in an hour. Fingers crossed. There is recipes for this stuff online, but I'm pretty sure I can adapt this recipe. The purists will say that this can't be done. The 1 hour pizza, you can't develop the flavors. But if you haven't planned this out properly, then surely we can create something that's acceptable within the time frame. But stick to the end and we'll find out. Before we go any further though, guys, please do me a huge favor and smash that like button. If you take any value at all from this video, it really helps me, and it really helps me kind of keep making these videos. So smash that like button, give me a follow if you're not, and click that little bell icon. All right, so let's go to 3 days ago where I started making my 72-hour pizza. Welcome to the past. It's kind of always the past because this is on YouTube, but anyway, this is 3 days before I was talking just previously. And we're going to start making our long ferment dough. So we're going to ferment this dough for 72 hours, but there's a few things we need to do first. So flour, so 00 flour, 480 grams of 00 flour. We've got 14 grams of sea salt here, 1 gram of dried active yeast, which isn't much at all, which hence the long ferment time, and 327 grams of water. I'm guessing she's kind of adapted this recipes in pounds from the States or something, and that's why the random numbers, but it works out to be around 70% hydration dough, which is pretty wet. So if you're kind of new to dough, you can lessen your water a little bit to make it easier to handle. So we're going to start by dissolving our salt and our yeast in the water. Your flour well in the center. So just working from the center out to make sure you kind of eliminate lumps. And this recipe is going to make 3 dough balls, around 270 grams each. So if you want to make more pizzas than 3, by all means just double or triple the dough. So once your dough's come together, lightly flour your bench. Get that on there. I like to use a dough scraper to get all that really wet dough off my fingers. And we're just going to knead this for about 5-6 minutes until it becomes nice and smooth. Use the same bowl. Gonna put some oil in there. A little bit more on top. All right, so you're gonna cover that with plastic, or you can use a damp tea towel. You just don't want air coming over it. And we're going to leave that somewhere warm for the bulk ferment. So that's going to take, depending on where you live in the world, it could take up to 6 to 8 hours, depending how cold it is. We'll come back when we're ready to cut these up and put them into balls, and then we'll shove them in the fridge for 24 to 72 hours. All right, so it's 8:30 the next day. I put this on at 12 p.m, so lunchtime yesterday, and not much has happened. So I got a funny feeling the yeast that I used wasn't very active. It is what it is. These things happen. So I went out this morning, brought some more yeast. And I forgot to mention yesterday, this is a way you can test your yeast before you use it, so you don't end up in the predicament that I'm in right now, by just putting a bit of yeast in some warm water, giving it a mix, and seeing if it foams or not. If it doesn't foam, then it's not very active. If it does foam, then you're on. So, not to worry, let's make another batch of this. We'll keep this anyway to see if anything does happen, and then we'll go from there. So, 8 hours later, and we've doubled in size. Thankfully this one worked. All we're going to do is knock this one back and make 270 gram balls. Pop them in the fridge. You want to do this in an airtight container. Definitely doesn't need to be kind of as tall as this one. So you just want to bring them in on themselves like this. So you have a nice smooth exterior. And ball them on nice and tight. Remember, this is a pretty high hydration dough, so it is a bit sticky, but you want to avoid using as little as flour as possible. There we go, with lid on. And then into the fridge for 24 hours for minimum, but really you want to leave it for 72 hours if you can. So we'll see you in 72 hours. All right, welcome back. Time to make our quick fire dough. So we're going to start with, I know in the last recipe we used 1 gram of yeast. We are going to go with 10 grams of yeast. Now, the more you use, the faster it's going to prove, but you kind of don't want that yeasty flavour, so it's a fine line. Anyway, we'll go with 10 and see what happens. To that, I'm going to add a little bit of sugar just to help that yeast, give it something to eat. Another 10 grams of caster sugar. And then to that, we're going to add warm water. So this isn't just boiled, it's warm. And we're going to go for a less of a hydration dough, just to try and help us be able to use this dough a bit easier. So we're going to go 300 grams, or 300 mils I should say, of water. All right, so that last recipe, 470 grams of type 00. And we're going to go the same, we'll go 10 grams of salt as well, just so it's a nice even number. 10, 10 and 10. And pretty crazily, because of the warm water and the sugar, you can actually already see, and that's like literally less than a minute, you can actually already see this yeast starting to foam up. And what I'm going to do before I mix this is actually just turn the oven on briefly, and what we're trying to do is just have a warm environment. We don't want it raging hot, but we want it warm. So oven on 100 degrees, and then I'll turn it off when we're good to go. Same as normal. Once we get this incorporated, we get it on the bench and we knead it for 5 to 10 minutes. Well, say 5 to 7 minutes, just till it's nice and smooth. Then we'll let this prove, knock it back, make our balls, and hopefully have something that we can call pizza. So I was first introduced to pizza in the work environment pretty late, I guess. Not late, but I'd been cooking for 10 years already before I'd actually worked with pizza, and it was in a restaurant in London, in a place called Pimlico, at a restaurant called the Orange. Well, actually it was a gastropub technically, but I'll tell you what, I think it's kind of a bit of a disjustice to places like that. The food that we were doing was pretty good. And we had a pizza oven there. We had a team of pizzaiolas, I think there was 4 or something on the roster, and the stuff that they were producing was just incredible. And that was probably honestly my first experience eating proper pizza, let alone cooking it. So proper wood fire oven, long ferment dough, all that good stuff. And it blew my mind. I never, you know, in hindsight, I should have spent more time kind of with those guys learning their craft, but I certainly ate a lot of their pies and they were absolutely delicious. So shout out to Tito if you're watching. He was kind of the head pizziola guy there. I'm pretty sure he's actually Argentinian, but he was one of the nicest blokes I've ever met. A genuinely kind soul and a fantastic pizza chef. And shout out to all that crew at the Orange. It was a pretty cool little place to work for a while. All right, bring this together into a ball using the bench. So it's nice and tight, relatively smooth. Back into the bowl, you mix it in, no need to clean it. Little glug of oil, in she goes, roll it around. Happy days. And we're gonna put this in the oven, but the oven's like, you know, you really want your oven about like 35, 40 degrees. You don't want it hot. All right, tomato sauce, super simple. Good quality tomatoes, very important. Whole tomatoes as well. Don't get the diced ones, get the whole ones. In a bowl. General rule of thumb, 1 gram of salt for every 100 grams of tomatoes. So this is 400 gram can, we've got 2 of them. So we need 8 grams of salt. Because I'm a rebel, I'm going to do it by feel. But if you're not confident with your salt, go on those methods. Okay, then all you do to that, and I'm not even joking here, and you can do this ahead of time as well, don't be afraid of doing that. Don't be tempted to blend this. I've done that in the past and you end up with this really big, airy, wet mess. Clean hand and crush them with your hands. It's that simple. Just run your hands through it, mix that salt in and crush it. You can taste this as well. If you can't find the San Marino tomatoes like I couldn't find, don't be afraid to taste this and make sure it's kind of sweet enough. And if it's not, then don't be afraid just to add a little bit of sugar, or you shouldn't really need to if you've got good quality tomatoes. And I'm making a big old mess here on the counter. It's like, reminds me of, you know, when you're in the pool as a kid and you used to squirt each other like that. Anyway, bit of basil in there as well. Again, you don't really need to do much to that. And that's why it's kind of better to do this overnight, just to let those two kind of marry together. And that's it, simple. Those are good tomatoes, so they're sweet enough. Wow, they taste like summer. Sauce, done. All right, cheese. Now, you're gonna want some mozzarella, and like I always say, don't be tempted to buy pre-grated cheese. It's crap. And then you wanna let them drain for as long as you can. Again, don't be afraid to do this overnight. Open it up, pull it out, or make a mess, very good. In there. So break it open, and then just let it drain. And that's it, that's all your margarita is. Some more basil. There's a big debate on whether you put basil on before or after. I prefer to put it on while you cook the pizza. I think it releases the oils better. But that's up to you, put it on after as well. I don't think there's anything wrong with either. And this dough has gone ballistic. I think that was like 40 minutes. The oven was probably a little bit hot, to be honest. But we've got a proven dough. Turn it out, we're gonna knock it back. Dunk, dunk. Sounds like a drum, it's a good sign. Cut it into 3 even balls. So, because I kind of played with the hydration levels a bit, let's see what that weighs. 840 on the dot. What's 840 divided by 3?
280.
280, very good. So same as the last one, bring them in on themselves so that they have a nice smooth top. So, and then using the bench with no flour, bring it in on itself. So you're using the friction of the bench to make it nice and tight. So we'll cover those up. Dampish tea towel for now. Is what our fermented doughs look like. So these have been out of the oven for an hour. So out of the oven, what am I talking about? Sorry, I'm rushing because I've got, my family's all hungry. So these are the 72-hour doughs. I've actually already stolen one, and that's what these look like. So the trick with these is, we're gonna use semolina, instead of flour. It's a bit coarser, and I find that it's a bit easier to work with. And in the pizza kitchen that I used to kind of hang out in, they used to mix flour and semolina. Pour some semolina where we're going to cut it. Then we're going to shove our dough knife through there, and we're going to lift it out. You don't want to kind of mess this up too much. You want to try and keep the shape. Oh, I've just messed that up. That's all right, we can get that back. The all-important stretch. It's not a great one to demonstrate on, but we'll have a go anyways. You want to start with a round dough. So this dough, this container I've had isn't perfect. It's created these kind of weird shaped doughs. But get your dough into a kind of a round shape. A bit more semolina on the top, because all that flour has been really well hydrated, because it's a high hydration dough. And then you're going to start from one end and work your way out. And you're going to leave about 2 centimeter gap on the side. Turn it. And again, running your fingers up, pushing out. And what you're doing is pushing the air into that crust, so you get a nice leopard skin effect. So you're going to push this out until you've got a really clear, defined, thicker end piece. It's about 2 centimeters thick, really. Then you can start stretching. You never use a rolling pin. There's no need to use a rolling pin. If you ever go to a pizza shop and they use a rolling pin, walk back out. Although there is one guy in the States whose name I've forgotten, and he uses a wine bottle. And apparently his pizzas are next level. So, like I always say, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Now I'm going to try and roll out one of these quick ones. Let's see how this goes. So it feels a lot lighter, as in it feels doughy, I guess. It's a weird thing to say. And it's a lot harder to stretch out. When you're pushing it, it's really elastic. It's coming back really quickly. So work this one. Same theory though. Push the air to the outside. Leave a 2 centimeter gap. I'm needing to use a lot of flour here, and we're going to start stretching this guy. Right, tell you what, this is a lot harder to stretch this one than that last one. Because this guy is so sticky, I'm going to make this one on the peel, because I don't want to risk it. All right, so we're going to make this one on the peel, because I feel a little bit unconfident leaving it there. Not too much. Don't go crazy with the sauce. You end up with a soggy pizza. No one likes a soggy pizza. Mozzarella. Basil. Now again, you can put the basil on before or after. It's personal preference, that one really is. Geez, I've managed to make a bit of a mess here. Drizzle of olive oil. And just a little bit of Parmesan. Just adds like another, nice little sharp, cheesy bite to it, I think. All right, let's go. Time to cook. All right, so this is the... Whew. These will take about 1.5 minutes, that's all. Excuse the overexposed light. They really don't take long. And this is the Gosney oven. This isn't a sponsored post, but these things are fantastic. They did send it to me. I didn't pay for it, but I'm not being paid to say this. These things are genuinely very good. I don't think I'd make pizza without a pizza oven like this now, but you can make it in a oven with a pizza stone in it. It will take a lot longer. I'm guessing 3.5 to 4 minutes rather than the kind of 90 seconds that this takes. All right, you can see here it's almost done. The mozzarella has still left quite a bit of liquid on there, which I think is I was not drying it long enough, or I just need to use a different style of mozzarella. But all right, I'm calling it. There she is. Watch me drop it. Time to cook the long ferment. I'll be back. In she goes. We've got some great leoparding there. Nice little burnt bits. All the flavour is. There really is a fine line between the perfectly cooked pizza and a completely burnt one. All right, I'm calling it. I don't know if you can see that, but pretty happy with that crust and how that's turned out. Looks pretty stunning. All right, excuse the mess. Kind of stressful trying to film pizza. There's a lot going on really quickly. All right, we'll start with the underdog. See what happens. Not bad. It's a little bit doughy, and it's definitely kind of not, you know, bursting with flavor. But the sauce is nice. Yeah, it's definitely a little bit doughy, but honestly, if I got served that at like a pub or something, I wouldn't be mad. Let's try this guy. I love that leoparding. Looks awesome. You know should be tasty. It's definitely better. You know, you actually taste the dough, right? You actually taste the bread. You know, it tastes like something. It doesn't just taste like you're chewing, you know, white death bread. You know, once again, shout out to Leopard Crust Pizza, because this dough is, you know, this recipe is fantastic. So, conclusion. Definitely, you know, a clear winner, eating them side by side. If you've got the time and you've got the foresight, even if it's only 24 hours in the cold ferment stage rather than the 1 hour, it's definitely worth it. You know, 72 hours I think is optimal. It'd be interesting to see what happens when you go further, or whether it just kind of drops off. I'm not sure. I'm sure someone's done a test on that. But this is kind of perfectly acceptable. You know, like I kind of talk about this a lot. Like, not everything has to be perfect when you're cooking at home for your friends and family. It's more important, I think, that you're sitting down to a home-cooked meal with your friends and family, then everything's perfect. So if you haven't planned it, something's come up, it's absolutely possible to make a pizza in, you know, realistically a couple of hours. But it is better if you have 3 days in the fridge developing that flavor. Thanks so much for watching all the way to the end, guys. Again, apologies for the mess. It's very unlike me, but that was pretty hectic trying to get these both up at the same time with one oven. Really appreciate all the support. Please don't forget to chuck me a like, and we'll see you next Sunday for another one. Peace.